I was just lounging on the couch, sipping my afternoon tea and mindlessly scrolling through social media, one of those lazy habits I picked up after retiring. Most of it was the usual: vacation pictures, political rants, baby updates. But then something unusual made my thumb freeze mid-scroll. A post. Just a simple post. But it hit me like a cold gust of wind. A young man, maybe in his late 20s, had written a plea. He said he was looking for ways to help his newly retired mother pass the time. That sounded innocent enough at first, even sweet, but as I read on, the words turned sharp, unsettling. "She's hardworking," he wrote. "She can tutor kids, clean houses, work night shifts, and only needs 1 day off a week. She's even willing to commute up to 2 hours each way." I felt a chill crawl down my spine, and I wasn't alone. The comment section erupted like a firestorm, hundreds of strangers voicing the disbelief I was already choking on. "Are you serious? Your poor mom. Do you even understand what retirement means? She worked nearly 40 years just to finally get some peace, and now you want her cleaning other people's houses?" Another comment read, "She's nearly 60. At that age, she should be waking up to the sound of birds, not alarm clocks. Drinking coffee on a porch swing, not sitting in traffic for a night shift." Line after line, the criticism built. No one was holding back. And rightfully so. The image of an older woman exhausted, commuting 2 hours to scrub strangers' bathrooms or tutor ungrateful teenagers, also her adult son could live comfortably, it made my stomach turn. Clearly rattled by the backlash, the young man returned to his post to defend himself. His words were defensive but calculated, as if he hadn't quite expected the internet to turn on him. "Before retiring, my mom was a senior teacher at a local public school," he explained. "Tutoring kids is easy for her, and after her divorce, she managed everything on her own. She's used to housework. She likes staying busy." Then, as if to seal the deal, he wrote, "Anyway, seniors have the right to work too, don't they? My mom doesn't want to sit around doing nothing. Is that such a crime?" I stared at those words. Doesn't want to sit around doing nothing? And something in me cracked. It wasn't just about one woman. It was about all of us. Every mother who had spent decades giving, sacrificing, holding families together with aching hands and quiet strength. And when we finally reach the finish line, when we're finally supposed to rest, we're told to get back up, lace our shoes, and keep running. The cruelty of it all made my breath catch in my throat, because you see, I had just retired too, only days ago, and what I read next would hit far closer to home than I could have ever imagined. "Before retiring, my mom was a senior teacher at a local public school," the post continued, as if that fact alone justified everything. "Tutoring kids is a piece of cake for her. After her divorce, she managed everything alone for decades. She's used to housework, and anyway, seniors have the right to work too, right? My mom doesn't want to sit around doing nothing. Is that a crime?" Reading that last line was like a punch to the gut. I sat motionless, my finger hovering above the screen. My name is Eleanor Price. I had just retired after 37 years of teaching, first in Mississippi, then for the last 25 in a small public high school outside Providence. Just last week, I packed up the last of my books, hugged my colleagues goodbye, and moved to Boston to be closer to my son Michael. He had begged me for months to join him and his wife Lauren in the city, said he missed me, said the city would be more vibrant for a newly retired woman like me. But now, here I was, just days into my new life, scrolling through that post on my phone and feeling the breath slowly drain from my lungs. Every word that stranger had written about his mother sounded hauntingly familiar. The way he described her, not as a person, but as a resource, a commodity, a woman defined by how useful she could still be. The more I read, the colder I felt. My own son had said eerily similar things over the last few days. "Mom, you're still sharp as a tack," Michael had said just last night, passing me a worn folder filled with lesson plans. "Tommy's mom is desperate. He's failing math, and no one else can handle him. Just help out a few days a week. It'll be easy for you. You taught calculus, remember?" I had smiled then, nodded, agreed, because it's what mothers do, isn't it? But now, with the screen of my phone glowing in my lap, I could feel the unease bubbling beneath my ribs. That post wasn't some abstract horror. It was my life, unfolding one quiet request at a time. That evening, I found myself at Michael's boss's home, sitting across from a boy who refused to make eye contact. Tommy was his name, 6th grade. His arms were crossed, his face sullen. I gently walked him through a simple fractions problem, then again and again and again. After 40 minutes, he still hadn't picked up his pencil. I had taught in public schools long enough to recognize learning difficulties, but this wasn't that. This was defiance, entitlement. A child who'd been handed excuses instead of discipline, and yet I stayed, trying to coax him through it, trying to prove, to whom, I don't know, that I still had something to offer. When the session ended, Tommy's mother, Angela, appeared at the door wearing a designer smile and a matching handbag. "Mrs. Price, thank you so much for your time," she beamed, holding out a glossy gift bag. "Just a little something from my husband's company. He just launched a new skincare line." I blinked, caught off guard. "Skincare?" I asked. "Michael said your husband worked in electronics." Angela's smile faltered, just for a second. "Oh no, you must have misunderstood. We've always been in beauty. Anyway, Tommy can be a little spirited, but I just know he'll warm up to you. I'm counting on you." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and just a heads up, if you need to take bathroom breaks during the lesson, let us know. We'll deduct it from the session time. We try to be very fair with the pay rate. Michael said $100 an hour, right? I'll Venmo him later today." I stood frozen in the foyer, the air thick with disbelief. $100 an hour? Michael told me it was 30. "Just a token," he said. "She's doing me a favor. They're not paying much." I didn't say a word. I handed Angela the untouched gift bag, walked outside, and didn't look back. On the long subway ride home, I sat hunched on the hard plastic bench, my phone clutched in my lap, my mind swirled with doubts, memories, dread, that post, the comments, the feeling in my gut that I was being played for a fool. I stood there in Angela's pristine foyer, my fingers wrapped around the handles of the glossy gift bag, the scent of expensive perfume clinging to the air like smoke. Her smile was already fading into the closing door behind her. For a moment, I couldn't move. It felt like someone had pulled the floor out from under me. Again, $100 an hour. That number kept spinning in my head like a cruel joke. Michael had told me, very plainly, that it was $30 an hour. "Just enough to keep busy," he said, hands in his pockets, gaze fixed somewhere over my shoulder. "She's kind of tight with money, but she said she really needs help. It's just a few bucks, Mom. Don't expect much." But now, as I stood there blinking in the hallway, the cracks widened. This wasn't a harmless miscommunication. This was deceit. Quiet, calculated deceit. And not from a stranger. From my own son. The walk back to the subway felt longer than it should have. I passed children with backpacks slung low, a couple arguing at a corner cafe, an old man hunched over his cane feeding pigeons in the park. Life moved all around me, but I felt utterly still, anchored in disbelief. By the time I reached the train platform, the daylight had softened into an amber dusk. I found a seat in the corner, away from the crowd, and finally pulled out my phone. That cursed post, the one that first caught my eye, was still up, still gaining comments, still sparking outrage, and then I saw it, a small update tagged at the bottom. To everyone judging me, please calm down. Since posting, I've already found my mom 2 great side gigs. Combined, they pay nearly what I make. She's happy, staying active, and now we don't have to worry about money. You're welcome, world. I stared at the words until they blurred. 2 side gigs, nearly what he makes. I could feel the weight of it all pressing down, so dense it was hard to breathe. I had moved here not for money, not for excitement, not even because I was bored. I moved because my only child told me he missed me, because he said it was time I enjoyed life, and he wanted me close, because I believed him. But the truth now stood loud and clear, staring me in the face in 1,000-pixel font. My retirement wasn't something to be celebrated, it was something to be monetized. I rode the train in silence, watching as the lights flickered through tunnels, casting reflections against the window that didn't feel like mine. My body was there, but my mind had drifted into the past, into all those sleepless nights when Michael was small and feverish, curled up on my chest as I prayed silently for his little lungs to clear, into all the second jobs I worked to make ends meet after his father left, all the clothes I bought secondhand just to make sure he had everything he needed. This couldn't be the same boy I raised. It couldn't be. And yet, the evidence was undeniable. By the time I reached the apartment, the streetlights had blinked on and the air had turned crisp. My legs were tired. My back ached. But what hurt most was the gnawing hollow in my chest. Michael wasn't home. Lauren wasn't either. A yellow, sticky note was plastered on the fridge in her handwriting, neat, slanted, indifferent, working late. Can you pick up some groceries and make dinner? We're out of olive oil and chicken. Thank you. 3 inches. Something inside me crumbled. Not because of the request. No, I'd spent my entire life taking care of people, but because of the assumption. The casual expectation that I, the newly retired guest in their home, would fall into the role of cook, maid, caretaker without hesitation, without being asked, as if it were owed. I didn't cook that night. I didn't go to the store. I didn't even take off my coat. I sat on the edge of the guest bed, my suitcase still half unpacked at the foot of it, and stared into the dim hallway, listening to the silence wrap itself around the walls. Suddenly, everything made sense. All the hints I had brushed off. The way Lauren called their bedroom our sanctuary and treated the guest room like a storage unit with a pillow. The way Michael had already given out my schedule to his boss without asking. The way every favor felt just a little too scripted. I hadn't been invited to Boston to be cherished. I had been recruited. I thought about the life I had left behind in Providence. My cozy, modest home with the creaky porch swing, my morning walks to the market where the cashier knew my name, the smell of the magnolia tree outside my bedroom window, the friends I met for coffee every Thursday. I had given it all up for this, for them. And what had I walked into? A transaction, one I never agreed to. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, my eyes tracing the shadows on the ceiling, my heart pounding with a strange mix of sorrow and resolve. Sleep tried to reach me, but every time I drifted, I saw Michael's face, not the little boy who used to fall asleep in my lap with a crayon in his hand, but the man he had become, sitting across from me, lying through his teeth with a smile on his face. At some point, around 3 a.m, I sat up, reached for the notebook I always kept in my purse, and wrote a list. At the top, what I've done for Michael. It filled 3 pages, from paying for his braces to walking 4 miles to work when the car broke down so he wouldn't miss his science fair, from skipping meals so he could have enough lunch money to join his classmates on field trips, from giving up on dating, remarrying, or moving across the country to accept a job offer just so his world wouldn't be disrupted. I looked at that list until the ink started to smudge beneath my fingertips, and then I turned to a new page. At the top, what he's done for me since I retired. There were only 2 bullet points. Convinced me to move to Boston. Booked me 2 jobs behind my back. The next morning, I woke to the sound of laughter in the kitchen. Lauren was pouring coffee, still in her silk robe, her bare feet padding across the tile as she chatted on speakerphone with someone about a spa day. Michael was sitting at the counter in his work shirt, scrolling through something on his phone, a stupid grin on his face. Neither of them noticed me, standing in the hallway. Neither of them looked up, not until I cleared my throat. "Oh, morning, Mom," Michael said, not looking up. "There's some toast left, and if you want eggs, I think we've got a couple in the fridge." Lauren gave me a smile that was all lip and no eyes. "Hope you're feeling better today. Big day, right? Tommy again this afternoon, and then Angela's kid tomorrow, remember?" I stepped forward. "Actually," I said, voice calm, even, "I won't be tutoring Tommy anymore." Michael looked up then, eyebrows raised. "What? Why not?" "I'm done," I said simply. "I didn't retire to take orders from 12-year-olds and be told when I can use the restroom." Lauren's eyes flicked to Michael. "Okay, Diana, let's not be dramatic." "No," I said louder now. "Let's." I walked over to the kitchen table, pulled out a chair and sat down. I placed my hands in front of me, laced together so tightly my knuckles turned white. "I know about the money, Michael." He froze. Lauren blinked. "I know they're paying $100 an hour. I know you told me 30. I know you already collected the full payment. And I know you lied to both me and them." Michael opened his mouth, but I lifted a hand. "Don't. Just don't." The room went quiet. Even the coffee machine stopped gurgling, as if it too knew this moment was bigger than breakfast. "I raised you better than this," I said, my voice cracking despite all my effort. "Or maybe I thought I did. Maybe I thought that all the nights I stayed up with you when you were sick, all the hours I worked so you could go to college, all the dreams I gave up so you could chase yours, maybe I thought that would count for something." Michael looked away. Lauren crossed her arms. "But now I see," I continued, voice growing stronger. "You didn't bring me here because you missed me. You brought me here because I'm cheap labor, because I'm someone who wouldn't complain, someone who's too old and too tired to fight back. Is that it?" Michael looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach turn. Not guilt, not sadness, panic, fear that his plan was unraveling. "Mom, listen," he said, standing. "You've got it all wrong. It was just, look, it's been a tough year. The mortgage is killing us. Lauren's job isn't as stable as we thought. I just figured, since you're retired, maybe you wouldn't mind helping out a little." "Helping out," I repeated, my voice sharp. "Helping out means babysitting once in a while. Helping out means cooking a dinner or watching the house while you're on vacation. Helping out does not mean being lied to, underpaid, overworked, and manipulated." Lauren stepped forward, her voice suddenly sweet. "Diana, no one's trying to hurt you. This is just a transitional phase. Once things settle down—" "I'm not interested in settling," I said. "I'm interested in leaving." Both their faces twisted. "What do you mean?" Michael asked. "Where would you even go?" "Back," I said. "To Providence, to my home, to the life I left behind for a son who no longer sees me as a mother, but as a servant." I stood slowly. My legs were trembling, but I didn't let them see it. "I'm leaving this weekend," I said. "I've already spoken with my old landlord. He never rented out my place after I left, said he had a feeling I might be back. I'll pack my things today." Michael moved toward me, desperate. "Mom, don't. Look, we need you here. You haven't even seen the new baby room yet. Lauren's pregnant." That stopped me in my tracks. My breath caught. "What?" Lauren stepped behind him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "We weren't planning to tell you until next week, but yes. I'm pregnant." I stared at them. The manipulation was so obvious it stung worse than the lie. "You're really going to dangle a grandchild over my head to get me to stay?" I whispered. Michael faltered. "No, it's not like that. I just thought maybe now you'd see how important your role is here." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "My role," I said, voice tight with grief. "You've made that crystal clear." And with that, I walked away. Not because I wanted to, but because it was the only thing left I could do for myself. The next few days were a blur of boxes and silence. I didn't speak much, and neither did they. Michael sulked. Lauren avoided eye contact altogether. The tension in the air was thick enough to suffocate. Each time I folded another blouse or wrapped up a picture frame in old newspaper, it felt less like packing and more like mourning. I wasn't just leaving a city. I was leaving behind the hope that my son might still be the boy I once raised, the boy who used to run into my arms after school, who clung to me when his father walked out the door and never came back. I was leaving behind the illusion that this move, this new chapter, was going to be anything but a fresh betrayal dressed up in family niceties. On my last night in Boston, I stood by the window of the tiny guest room, my prison cell for the past few months, and looked out at the city lights. Below, cars buzzed by like insects, and in the distance, I could see the edge of the Charles River glimmering in the dark. Michael knocked once before letting himself in. He lingered by the door, trying to seem casual. "You sure you don't want to stay, Mom?" Just until the baby's born. I didn't answer. He tried again. "Look, we messed up, okay? I shouldn't have lied, but things are hard. Really hard. You think I like asking you for help? You think I wanted to take your money?" "You didn't take it," I said flatly. "You stole it." He flinched like I'd slapped him. Then his voice turned bitter. "You're really going to walk away from your only child over a few tutoring gigs and some pocket change?" I turned from the window, my eyes calm. "I'm not walking away because of the tutoring. I'm walking away because somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing me as a person." He opened his mouth, but I held up my hand. "I gave you everything, Michael. Everything. My time, my health, my money, my dreams. I did it gladly because I loved you, but love that's not returned, it stops being love. It turns into something else, something that breaks you." He stood there, stunned, trying to summon a retort, but he had none. Not anymore. The next morning, I rolled my suitcase to the door. Lauren stayed upstairs. I didn't blame her. She had no idea what to say to me, and frankly, I didn't care anymore. Michael followed me down the front steps. "You really going back to that tiny place in Providence?" "Yes. What are you going to do there?" "Live," I said simply. He laughed once, not kindly. "You're not 20 anymore, Mom. You're almost 70. You think starting over at your age is going to be some fairy tale." I paused on the last step and looked back at him, my chin held high. "No," I said. "I think it's going to be hard, and lonely, and terrifying, but it'll be mine." He said nothing as I climbed into the cab, just stood there, hands in his pockets, watching the only person who had ever truly sacrificed for him disappear from view. The ride to the train station was quiet. The driver was an older man, probably around my age. He didn't ask questions, just nodded respectfully when I told him I was heading home. "Family visit?" he asked, halfway through the ride. "No," I replied, looking out the window. "Family escape." He didn't press me further. The train station was already buzzing with activity when I arrived. I had just enough time to buy a coffee, find a seat, and breathe. I stared at the departure board overhead, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was on someone else's schedule. I was going home, to a life that may not be easy, but at least it would be honest, and I would make it mine, one quiet, determined step at a time. The train ride to Providence was long, but I didn't mind. Each passing tree, bridge, and quiet stretch of field felt like a slow unraveling of all the tension I'd carried with me. My phone stayed on silent in my purse. I didn't check it. I didn't care if Michael or Lauren messaged again. I had spent enough years answering every call, every favor, every disguised demand. Now, I owed no one. As the train pulled into the familiar station, my heart fluttered with a strange mix of anxiety and relief. The air smelled different here, cleaner, quieter, like it belonged to me again. I stepped off the platform and into the small cab that would take me back to my old neighborhood. The cab driver, a cheerful woman in her 50s, made a light conversation, but I was too wrapped in my thoughts to offer much. It wasn't until we turned the final corner that my breath caught in my throat. My old street was unrecognizable. The modest row of houses I'd known for decades was lined with construction trucks, city surveyors, and brand new fencing. Big white signs were posted at every corner with the logo of a major real estate development firm. Bulldozers were parked in front of the old playground. Men in hard hats were walking around pointing, measuring, taking photos. My heart raced as the cab pulled to a stop in front of my house, or what was left of it. The porch was boarded up. My rose bushes were gone, but the structure still stood, somehow untouched for now. I stumbled out of the car and rushed to the chain-link gate. A construction worker turned toward me. "Ma'am, this area is restricted. Are you lost?" This is my house. I lived here." His brows lifted. "Name?" "Eleanor Price." He blinked, pulled a clipboard from under his arm, and flipped through a few pages. Price. Oh, yeah. You haven't signed yet." "Signed what?" "The buyout agreement. They're offering close to $600,000 for this place. Haven't heard back from you, though. You're the last holdout. Lucky you." He chuckled like it was some small-town joke. My knees almost gave out. I clutched the fence to steady myself. $600,000? I had left this house behind, thinking it was worth next to nothing, a worn-down two-bedroom place given to me through the school district back in the 80s. But now, with the school closing, the area rezoned, and the city's latest shopping district pushing in, that little square of old wood and cracked siding had become a pot of gold. He handed me a card. "You'll want to call the real estate rep soon. They're eager to close." I stood there in shock for what felt like an hour. All that time in Boston, I had worried about being a burden, about not having enough, about scraping by in the shadow of my son and daughter-in-law. And here, fate had been quietly cooking up a surprise, my future, waiting for me in the bones of the home I'd once abandoned. Later that evening, I met with Kathy, my older sister, at the local diner. She was already seated in our usual booth, waving me over with a wide smile and a cup of coffee ready. "I was hoping you'd make it back before the developers caught you," she said, sliding the sugar across the table. "Your name's still on the deed, thank God. They're offering cash. You don't even have to move a thing." I blinked. "You knew about this." She grinned. "Of course. Whole neighborhood's been buzzing. I figured you'd call the moment you saw it, But knowing you, you probably marched straight up to your porch and nearly fainted. We laughed. Real belly-deep laughter, the kind I hadn't felt in ages. It startled me, how good it felt to laugh again. "What are you going to do with the money?" Kathy asked. I looked out the window. The sun was setting over Providence, casting a golden hue over the streets. I could still hear the hum of the diner's old jukebox playing something soft and familiar. I wrapped my hands around my coffee cup and smiled. "I'm going to start over," I said. "Maybe travel, maybe take art classes, buy myself a small house near the coast, grow tomatoes, adopt a cat that doesn't like anyone but me, live like I've got nothing to prove." Kathy chuckled. "That sounds like the Eleanor I remember." I smiled wider. "She's still here. Just took a little while to come back." The very next morning, I stood in front of the mirror in my old bedroom, still mostly intact, and barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Not because I had aged, not because of the faint lines or graying hair, but because for the first time in years, I saw a spark in her eyes, a flicker of something I thought I'd lost a long time ago, ownership of my life, of my choices, of my future. That afternoon, I signed the sale papers. The developer's representative, a slick man in an expensive coat and too much cologne, barely hid his excitement as I handed over the signed documents. "Congratulations, Ms. Price. You're now $615,000 richer." He extended his hand like he was doing me a favor, but I didn't shake it. I just smiled, slowly, as if I were savoring the last bite of a meal, because I wasn't just richer, I was free. With the wire transfer confirmed, I went back to the same diner Kathy and I had met in the night before. I ordered a slice of peach pie and a coffee and took out my notebook, not the one filled with grocery lists or family birthdays, a new one, blank, waiting. At the top of the first page, I wrote, "What I want, not what I owe." Underneath, I made a list, a little house by the coast. Nothing fancy, just enough for me and quiet, an easel and painting supplies, a real vacation, somewhere with sea cliffs and no phones, a garden, tomatoes, basil, wildflowers, people who see me, not what I can give, not what they can take. It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd allowed myself in decades. As I scribbled, the waitress, a young woman with bright eyes and a shy smile, paused beside my booth. "That looks like a life worth living," she said, glancing at my list. I smiled. "It is." Within 2 weeks, I'd found the perfect place. It wasn't beachfront, not quite, but it had a view of the water, a small fenced yard, and a porch swing that groaned like it had stories to tell. I moved in on a Tuesday morning with only 2 suitcases, a cat I'd adopted named Murphy, and the softest pair of slippers I'd ever owned. I unpacked slowly. No rush. No one asking me to make dinner or scrub floors or take on tutoring jobs. No tight smiles or fake apologies. Just sun through the windows and the ocean breeze through the kitchen door. And for the first time in years, silence wasn't loneliness. It was peace. The neighbors were older, like me. Widows and single women who had spent lifetimes nurturing others, children, husbands, co-workers, friends, now finally nurturing themselves. We met every Sunday for tea in one another's yards. We brought pastries, shared recipes, and swapped stories about the lives we'd left behind. There was Bernice, a former jazz singer who still wore red lipstick at 9 a.m. sharp, and Margot, who had once taught biology and now spent her days knitting sweaters for shelter animals. They welcomed me like I'd always belonged. No questions, no judgment, just warmth. They didn't ask what had happened, not directly, but I think they knew. They'd all lived versions of my story. That unspoken sisterhood was more healing than any apology Michael or Lauren could have offered. But of course, nothing stays quiet forever. 3 months into my new life, just as I'd finished planting my first rose bushes, a letter arrived. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar. Michael. I didn't open it right away. I left it on the table next to my teacup. I watered the plants, fed Murphy, read a chapter from the mystery novel I'd been savoring, and finally, when the sky began to turn that pinky gold I loved so much, I sat down and slit the envelope open. Inside were 3 pages, handwritten, no salutation, no "Dear Mom," just words, hesitant, guilt-ridden, full of contradictions. He said he was sorry, that he hadn't realized how much he'd taken, that Lauren had left him, that he'd been let go from his job, that he finally understood what it felt like to be discarded. He wrote, "I thought I was doing what was best for my family. I didn't realize I'd stopped being part of yours." And then, at the bottom of the last page, he asked if I could ever forgive him, if we could meet. I closed the letter gently. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I didn't rush to respond, because forgiveness isn't about one letter. It's about rebuilding slowly if you even want to. And I wasn't sure I did, but I folded the letter and tucked it into my notebook, underneath my list. I turned to a new page, and I wrote, "Maybe." Then I put the kettle on and walked out to the porch, Murphy at my heels, the ocean waiting quietly in the distance, because this time, whatever happened next, it would happen on my terms. A week passed before I thought about Michael's letter again. The notebook stayed on my nightstand, unopened. I wasn't ignoring him, at least not intentionally, but I wasn't rushing toward him either. That alone felt like progress. One morning, I received an unexpected call. The name blinking on my screen stopped my breath. Eleanor Price. I hesitated. Then, instinctively, I picked up. "Eleanor." Her voice was small, uncertain. "Yes." I kept my tone neutral. There was silence on the other end for a beat, then a soft inhale. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." The words felt stiff, rehearsed. I didn't answer. I let her sit in that silence. The same silence she had once left me in when I called and she wouldn't pick up, when I made dinner and she never came home. Finally, she spoke again, more urgently. "I messed up. We both did. But I need you to know, Michael's not the same. He's been different ever since you left. He talks about you every day." I closed my eyes. The breeze outside rattled the window panes, gently, like it too was holding its breath. "I appreciate you calling," I said finally, "but I'm not ready." And then I hung up. That evening, I sat by the water, toes buried in the cool sand. Bernice joined me, her red shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. She didn't say anything for a long time, just passed me a mug of tea and let the waves speak for us. When the sky turned dark, I finally said, "My son wants to meet." And now, she's called me too. Bernice tilted her head toward me. "Do you want to see them?" "I don't know." She sipped her tea. "You don't owe them your forgiveness, Eleanor, but if you need to speak your piece, do it for you, not for them." That night, I slept deeply. No dreams, no replayed arguments, just stillness. 2 days later, I wrote Michael a letter. I didn't text. I didn't call. I wrote with pen and paper because I needed him to feel the weight of every word. "Michael, you broke something in me that I'm still mending. You took the years I had saved for peace and tried to turn them into more work, more sacrifice. I gave you everything, and for a time, you gave me nothing back but expectations. But I've never stopped being your mother. I don't know what that means anymore, but I am willing to meet once, on my terms. Come next Thursday, 2 p.m., the Boardwalk Cafe near the pier. No excuses, no surprises. Mom, I sealed it and dropped it into the mailbox. The wind rustled the trees as if approving. Now, the ball was in his court. The next Thursday, I sat outside the cafe early. Murphy was curled under the table at my feet, the waves crashing a steady rhythm behind us. At exactly 2:07 p.m., I saw him. He looked thinner, older, not in years, but in spirit, like life had stripped away some of the shine he used to carry so easily. He walked slowly, holding a paper bag in one hand, eyes darting nervously. He spotted me and froze. I raised a hand. Just a gesture. No smile. No warmth. Not yet. He approached. "Hi, Mom." I nodded toward the empty chair. "Sit." He sat. For a long time, neither of us spoke. I sipped my iced tea. He picked at a corner of the bag nervously. "I brought you something," he said quietly, pushing the bag forward. I didn't reach for it. "I'm not here for gifts," I said flatly. "I know," he said quickly. It's not to buy you. It's just a photo album, old pictures I found, of us, before." I glanced at the bag, but didn't touch it. "And what do you want from me, Michael?" He looked up sharply, startled by the directness. But I didn't soften. He swallowed. "I want a second chance. Not for money, not to use you, just to know you again, the real you, not the version I built in my head." I stared at him for a long time. "What did you see when you looked at me back then?" I asked. He blinked. "I saw someone strong, tireless, always there." I nodded. "Useful, you mean?" His eyes welled. "I didn't mean to reduce you to that, but I did. I know I did. I was so focused on building a future that I didn't see who I was standing on to build it." The honesty in his voice shook something loose in me. "I'm not ready to forgive you," I said, voice soft but firm. "But I'm not shutting the door either." Michael nodded slowly, like he understood exactly what that meant. We talked for a while longer, about nothing important, about Murphy and my garden and the neighbor's cat who liked to sleep on my porch swing. Michael listened, really listened. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, he stood. "I hope we can talk again," he said. "We'll see." And then he walked away, the paper bag still sitting on the table between us. I reached in and pulled out the album. Inside was a photo of me holding baby Michael in a park, grinning wide, hair messy from the wind. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel grief. I felt possibility. That evening, I sat on the porch swing, Murphy curled at my feet, the photo album open in my lap. The photos felt like fragments from a different life. Me pushing Michael on a tire swing. Richard, my late husband, smiling over a grill. A tiny Lauren sitting in a laundry basket, laughing uncontrollably. I traced each image with my fingers, not with longing, but with a strange kind of peace. The pain was still there, but softer now, more like a scar than an open wound. The next morning, I called Susan Lane, my sister. "Are you busy next Saturday?" I asked. "For you?" "Never," she replied, immediately suspicious. "Why?" "I want to throw a dinner. Nothing fancy, just something to remind myself what a full house sounds like again." Susan paused, then said softly, "You're doing it, aren't you?" "Doing what?" "Healing." I smiled, the first real one in a while. "I think I am." The dinner was a simple affair: chicken pot pie, mashed sweet potatoes, a bottle of white wine that had been collecting dust in the cupboard since before the move. Susan came early to help. She fussed over the flower arrangements until I chased her out of the kitchen. Bernice brought 2 of our dance group friends, all laughter and silver curls. Even Harold Benson, my old neighbor from Providence, stopped by with his guitar and played soft folk music on the porch while the sun dipped below the trees. The clatter of cutlery, the murmur of stories, the occasional burst of shared laughter, it all stitched something back together in me. This, I thought, this is what life is supposed to feel like. For the first time in years, I didn't feel used or invisible. I felt present, rooted, whole. Weeks passed in a blur of color and joy. My days were filled with purpose again, not the kind imposed on me by obligation, but the kind I chose. Flower arranging classes, Sunday hikes with Bernice and our ragtag, retired and reckless crew. I even started volunteering twice a week at the local library, helping children with reading. They called me Miss Eleanor, and the nickname stuck like honey. Michael sent me letters every week, actual handwritten letters, stamped and mailed. He never asked for forgiveness, he just shared stories about how he had started going to therapy, how he'd apologized to Lauren's mother, how he spent Saturdays at a shelter teaching coding to teens. Each letter, a small, quiet gesture, a pebble on a path he was rebuilding, slowly, patiently. I didn't reply to every letter, but I read them all, and once in a while, I sent one back. Just a short note, a recipe, a photo of Murphy, a memory he might have forgotten, and that was enough, for now. One afternoon, as I was leaving the community center after teaching an art class for seniors, I heard a familiar voice call out behind me, "Miss Eleanor?" I turned to find Lucas Miller standing there, Angela Miller's son, the boy I used to tutor. He looked taller now, wiser somehow. His eyes weren't filled with defiance anymore, but understanding. "I never got to thank you," he said, his voice low, "for not giving up on me." I blinked, surprised. "You were a challenge," I admitted, "but worth it." He smiled sheepishly. "I got into college. Community college for now, but it's a start." "That's more than enough," I said, and meant it. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a small wooden box. "I made this in shop class. For you." I opened it. Inside was a simple carved figure, a woman standing tall, holding a book in one hand and a flower in the other. I ran my fingers over the wood, overcome with emotion. "Thank you, Lucas," I whispered. "This means more than you know." That night, I placed the box on my mantel, right beside the photo album. It didn't matter that I had once been cast aside by those I loved most. I had found something even stronger, the life I had built in the ashes of disappointment. I didn't need anyone's permission to matter. I already did. The next morning, a letter from Michael arrived. It was shorter than usual, just one line. "I don't expect you to come, but I'd like to invite you to my child's christening. Her name is Eleanor." I stared at the note for a long time. A tide of emotion swelled in my chest, gratitude, grief, and something else entirely. Pride. I sat with the letter in my lap for hours, the sun shifting slowly across the living room floor as time passed. Her name is Eleanor. The words felt like a ripple through my soul. My name, chosen not out of habit, but out of reverence. A name he had once ignored, now carved into the beginning of another life. A part of me wanted to toss the letter aside, to stay safely wrapped in the quiet life I had rebuilt, to refuse the risk of opening my heart again. But another part, a quieter, deeper part, whispered something different. Go. Not for him, not for forgiveness, but for her. The day of the christening dawned gray and misty. A soft drizzle fell as I stepped off the bus and made my way through the sleepy streets of Boston. I hadn't told anyone I was coming, hadn't responded to Michael's invitation, but something inside me knew this wasn't about reunions. It was about bearing witness. The church was small, modest, a whitewashed chapel with ivy creeping up one side. I stepped in quietly and slid into the last pew. No one noticed me, until they did. Michael turned his head. His eyes met mine. His mouth opened slightly, but he didn't move toward me. He didn't wave. He didn't cry. He just looked, his expression a mix of shock, guilt, and something else I hadn't seen in him since he was a boy. Hope. Lauren, sitting beside him, held the baby in her arms. She looked over, followed his gaze, and stiffened. But then slowly, she turned the baby toward me, held her up, just slightly, as if offering a truce. The infant yawned, a perfect drowsy little thing in a white dress with a lace around the collar. My breath caught. That's her, I thought. Eleanor, a fresh start. I didn't stay for the reception. I left as quietly as I had come, but as I walked away from the church, I felt no sorrow, no bitterness, only peace. Back home in my little cottage, the flowers in the garden were just beginning to bloom. Bright yellow daffodils, soft pink tulips, the hyacinths already nodding in the breeze. Spring had come again. The seasons always do. I found the baby's photo in the parish bulletin tucked into my coat. I slipped it into the photo album, right at the end. No caption, no explanation, just a new beginning. Weeks turned to months. I returned to my routines, volunteering, dancing, teaching art at the center. But something had shifted. I found myself thinking about that baby more than I expected, wondering if she'd have her mother's chin, her father's fire, or maybe, just maybe, my stubborn spirit. One evening, I received a letter, not from Michael, not from Lauren, from the baby's godmother. It was short. I just wanted to say thank you for coming. It meant more than you know. Michael doesn't say much about it, but I think that day changed something in him. He's different, more patient, more grounded. He talks about you, and sometimes when the baby cries, he sings the lullaby you used to hum in the kitchen while peeling apples. I know because I remember it too. He sings your song, Eleanor. I closed the letter and sat in silence, the music of memory humming around me. I was no longer waiting to be needed, but somehow I had never stopped being loved, even if the road to that love was long, winding, and paved with heartbreak. In the quiet of my golden years, I had discovered something far more valuable than peace, dignity, clarity, and the strength to define my life on my own terms. Not as a mother, not as a wife, not as a retiree or a teacher, but as Eleanor Price, a woman who had given all she had and finally had given back to herself. Epilogue. Eleanor's voice. They say time is the best teacher, and maybe it is, though it rarely hands out answers the way I used to on a chalkboard. No, time teaches in quieter ways, through silence, through loneliness, through the things we're forced to live through without applause, without thanks. I spent most of my life being needed, and I mistook that for being loved. I poured everything I had into others, my students, my husband, my son. I gave until my hands ached, until my back bent under the weight of it all. But when I finally had nothing left to give, the silence that followed was deafening. That silence, that was my lesson. It wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. It told me the truth I'd never dared say out loud. If I wanted peace in this life, I'd have to stop waiting for someone else to hand it to me. I had to claim it, defend it, protect it with the same tenacity I used to protect my son from a world that never once protected me. When I walked away, people called me bitter, cold, even selfish. But I was none of those things. I was tired. And then I was free. Free to sit in the sun with a book that no one interrupted. Free to sleep in, to laugh, to cry, to dance again, to breathe without being measured by how useful I was to someone else. In time, my son came to see the cracks in his reflection, and though we may never be what we once were, he knows now what it cost me to be his mother. And maybe that's enough. Maybe the real miracle wasn't in repairing what broke. Maybe it was in standing back up after the breaking. So if you're listening to this and you feel forgotten, if you've spent your life giving everything, your time, your youth, your body, your heart, only to be met with silence, know this: you are not invisible. You are not used up. You are not unworthy just because no one is clapping for you anymore. You are still here, and that means it's not too late to be your own damn miracle.